up, everybody? We're back. Another video on more lenses. Chiopt, stealing their name right out of the Brad and Angelina playbook. The Brangelina situations. Chiopt, China Optical. If you don't know them, they're the makers of one of my favorite zoom lenses that is out. It's a 28 to 75, I believe. I think it has a really great vintage look. I've been a fan of it for a while, so I was very excited when I saw that they were making primes when we visited NAB. Now, we put these just on a quick camera when we were there, and I immediately was like, oh, there's something special here. I like these. I'm excited to get these and play with them and see what they do. So they sent us a set for review, and after putting these through their paces inside and out, I think this is one of the more interesting sets of lenses we've reviewed here in a while. So we're gonna tell you about it right now. And first, let's jump in on pricing. So this is a 5-lens set, consists of a 16, 24, 35, 50, 85. The 24 through 85 are T15s and the 16 is a 2.2. It's come in all the mirrorless mounts, RF, L, and E. And right off the bat, 5 lenses is $44.99 with a case. So sub 1,000 per lens, let's say $858.99 a lens. Very competitive. I would say these probably sit in the realm of competing with the Simera Cs from DZO, but they have a 16 mil where the DZO kind of stops at 21. So that is a nice bonus there. And these maybe have some slightly nicer mechanics and a little bit more controlled breathing compared to the Simera Cs, but really cool little set of lenses. And when you look at construction on them, these all weigh about close to 2 pounds a piece, so they're pretty dense and thick for being very small and lightweight. You know, these are smaller than a soda can, and 77 millimeter fronts for screw-in filters, which is great. We shot a lot of stuff here with the little Nisi Jetmag Pro, which we really like running around with. Great color rendition. So right off the bat, these are really interesting lenses, and I'm just gonna tell you my own set of pros and cons, because most of these are pros. I really love the look. It's a great modern vintage kind of vibe. I think it's got enough interest going on where you still have character out of the lens, but with character, it's probably less high performing, so there's always that trade-off. Right off the bat, the only 2 negatives that I see with these lenses is that there's no M mount. After the Simera Cs, I just think more lenses should be in a universal format if they're gonna be this size. There's just too many good camera systems, and you know, people are used to shooting on Sonys and Blackmagics and Canons and PL, and I just feel like anymore, if you're not making a universal lens, you're just losing out on some amount of sales. So right off the bat, when I saw them at NAB, it was the only piece of advice I gave them was please make these into M mount, and so far, they don't have an M mount for them, but hopefully that could possibly come in the future. The only other real downside that I have to these lenses is the 16 is a T2.2 instead of a T15. Now, I know 16 T15 in full frame is hard to do, and I fully agree. So what I would have rather seen in this set is maybe an 18 T15 like the Aureus set, and just had a consistent aperture set of lenses. And then if I need a special set that's wide, I can do that with like a Laowa or something else, because 18 on full frame is really honestly pretty wide. So those are my only 2 real drawbacks with this set. Other than everyone's own subjective opinions about flare color, you know, most of the lower end lenses, even some higher end ones these days, kind of have some flares that prioritize green instead of, you know, other colors in the rainbow. So the pros are like everything else. Great cheap set of lenses that has character, that's lightweight, put on a gimbal, has good mechanics. You know, maybe not as robust mechanics as something like the Aureus or the Aros, but they're twice the price. So you have to keep that into consideration. Now we're just gonna jump straight into our testing here. And one thing to keep in mind that I really think is a subjective look on these is just how big the fall off is on these. Now we are shooting on Raptor, which is a VistaVision sensor, and these are only slated to cover 43.5 image circle, which is full frame, not VistaVision. So if you're seeing a lot happening on the edge of frame, just know as you crop into full frame sensors or even Super 35, a lot of that would go away. And that's pretty much the only thing when I'm looking at these and I'm like, oh, okay, well, That is a lot to deal with on the edge, but it is a look. So if you like that, it's there. So I'm gonna show you the test. We'll be back in a bit. that's the test. You've seen some real world footage outside. You've seen some control testing inside, so you know how these perform top to bottom all across the plane. Really fun, interesting set. I like the flares. They're not overbearing, just enough interest. I love the bokeh texture. As you get in on that 85, you get big swirly cat's eye bokeh that has a really interesting look, wide open, that mellows out. You know, you have some light loss wide open in the corners that I think kind of really adds to some 3D pop if you want to shoot that wide open. Or as you stop down to 2.8, most of that illumination comes back, which is really nice to see, and that sharpness is there, a lot less failing glare, and a little bit more contrast. So overall, as a $4,500 set of 5 primes that is in a very small case, that is very lightweight, that you could do pretty much whatever you want with, especially considering the 50 is almost a macro on top of that. You know, I think they took a little bit of the DNA from their slasher macro primes and put it at least in one of these. It's really cool to have a full-fledged, you've got a wide, a 50 that's tight, an 85 that has character. It is a lot in one set, and you might think, well, maybe that's not so consistent. But if you want a lens set that you can have a focal length that does a little bit of everything at some point in your selection, this set really has it. I really like these, and you know, hopefully this is something we can keep here in the house, because I think these will be a great mix with the zoom that they offer, as well as the macro primes that we shoot a ton of stuff here for our channel on. So with that, that is the Chiopt Aura Primes. Great value, in my opinion, but hey, it's just my opinion. Everyone likes different things. That's what's great about having so many options. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you're ever in Seattle, hit us up for some rentals or just say hi. Catch you on the next one.